We are recording.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Weigh-In.
Yeah. Well, we're going to dabble into some fiction, so to speak, comic book-based fiction. And it's a great topic, too. There's a big difference between both companies, Marvel and DC, as we know. And, Marvel arguably is more popular and obviously doing it well in the box office.
So what are we talking about? Let the audience know what we're talking about.
I was going to say that basically, why are Batman and Spider-Man so popular? Now, the thing is, I think personally, the reason why Batman is so popular for DC Comics is because, for all intents and purposes, he really echoes what the Marvel brand is.
So you can embody and identify more. I'll tell you straight up, obviously as a kid, I was fascinated with comic books like, every other young boy, but I really got into Batman when the Nolan movies came out. The Dark Knight in particular, it had a special features that had the psychology of the Dark Knight, and it really delved into his psyche and why he does what he does, and it really made me appreciate the character. The processes that he goes through, like self-regulation. Yeah, Batman is extremely disciplined, unbelievable. How many times has he had the opportunity to kill the Joker, and he has not?
He pulls back,
yeah, that level of discipline is uncanny, and I respect that.
And not only that, Christopher Nolan, what an amazing guy to actually be able to do 3 Batman movies. A lot of times, he makes a movie, he's on
critically acclaimed. Yeah,
and they made great money for the company, and the first one was just a stunning beginning, the way it started off. That's your favorite one, right?
Begins is my favorite.
Yeah, I think they actually sort of fall apart with each film a little bit. They don't fall apart totally, but they lose a little of the luster of the first one. The second one's really, really good, but, it's not bad. And then the third one, it really kind of drops off a little bit, too. Though I definitely like the Bane a lot, in that film.
Batman he's approaching 80, right?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He's approaching 80, which is phenomenal. Shout out to Batman.
Wow.
Now, what was the controversy? You would know better than me. Bob Kane, Bill Finger.
Yeah. Bob Kane's father was a lawyer, but Bob Kane was hanging out with Bill Finger and some other young fellas at the time working on comic books and things. So it turned out that Bill Finger was doing the majority of the work, and Bob Kane, though he contributed somewhat to the character, he really didn't do a real lot. He stole a lot of the ideas. But Bob Kane's father went to talk to DC when his young son was with him and said, here's the contract. If you want my son's character called the Batman, let's sign up, and my son owns it. Back then, those young kids didn't think about the fact that they were being ripped off. And that did become a bigger problem many, many years later with Jack Kirby and Stan Lee over at Marvel, but that's been settled.
Now, Batman has obviously transitioned as far as the tenor of the character. So, to the best of my knowledge, Batman started off a little bit more lighthearted. And
I wouldn't say he was totally lighthearted. He used a gun in the early days,
Yeah, but who was it? The guy that he did 300?
Frank Miller.
Frank Miller. So Frank Miller ushered in the grittier Batman.
He did.
And that, I believe, started to really bolster the hype of Batman. And people appreciated that grittiness. So I don't know that was 80s, right?
That was 1985.
That was 85, so I was still a kid. Was the era of comic books as far as DC, was he the grittiest? What made that special?
Well, just prior to that, the character was still called Batman. Now, even though The Dark Knight is Batman, that's when he decided to actually use the name The Dark Knight, the same name that Nolan used on his first Batman feature. Because it issues in a change in the character, a more mature take, an older, more mature superhero who can fight villains, and the villains are mature along with him also. But it's grittier, it's more realistic, and there's no time to be fucking around anymore. No pussyfooting around. Batman is, he has to take care of business because he's dealing with people that are ruthless and just serial killers and just sick people.
Now the tragedy component. He lost his family.
Yeah.
In Crime Alley, they were gunned down. He's seen it. Do you think people really they tie into that? You think people really they connect with that?
Well, I mean, whenever we see it in the films, it's always it's the origin going back to when they began in the late 1930s. A lot of people have gunned down parents and things of that nature, but back then, it stood out more and stuff. I think a lot of people understand it, respect it. They don't deny it.
You think on a psychological level it allowed people to empathize with the character?
I think so. I mean, remember in the 30s, we were dealing with a rash of murders galore by gangsters and mobsters in Chicago and New Orleans, New York City, and Boston and everything. And superheroes really came out of the fact that we were coming out of we were still in the Depression, and we were just about ready to break out of the Depression, and things were pretty bad across the country at the time. It was a real mess.
So Batman's like a juxtaposition because he's like a demon coming out of the night to protect you.
Yeah, and it scares the bejesus out of the villains because like where Superman's got a blue suit and red, and the cape's red, and he's like Mr. Cheery with the nice haircut and a jerry curl on his top of his forehead there. Batman comes out, it's like, I'm going to bring hell to you. You're not just going to get arrested and go to jail. We're going to mess you up, break a few elbows, and beat the living shit out of you.
Fuck your shit up.
And leave the impression. Sometimes he'd show up, he'd beat the guys up, they see a bat, they don't know where he's at. His whole system is based on, I'm going to mess with you, but I'm really going to mess with you psychologically also.
Yeah, I like it. So, on the other half of the spectrum, you got Mr. Peter Parker. Spider-Man.
Peter Parker came at a time when the industry of comics was actually was wavering a little bit. So that was the beginning of the Marvel universe that began in '61 with the Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man was right after that. At that time, remember a lot of people in America just were coming out of the 1950s. It was kind of a weird period for the country. 10 years or so, 15 years after World War II. But there was a lot of problems in Vietnam, and there was a lot of people were burning the flag. Things were starting to change. And teenagers were really feeling their own. They were coming into their own. So when the superheroes got refreshed by, Steve Ditko, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and all those guys, they had to create characters that were more humanized, more realistic. And everybody's got hang-ups, man. When I was a teenager, I was nervous about girls, and I wanted to talk to them, but I was scared, and they'd giggle. I mean, your problems with your grandparents, the wife, you think a lot when you're a young kid as a teenage boy.
So tying in to the same ideology that that permeates Batman's psychology. Here you have Peter Parker.
Yep.
Lost his uncle at a young age.
Yep. And
this death is a core component of who Peter Parker is. With great power comes great responsibility. We all know it.
That's right.
So once again, do you think that the company initially set out to use this tragedy to maybe get people to really dial into the character and really empathize with the character? Because I know I did.
I think that was definitely the idea, and I think at that time it hit, same way the Batman's origin was powerful in the late 30s. Spider-Man's origin was very, very powerful in the early 60s. Very big time for the country in the 60s, and it led into the freedoms of the 70s. The creative freedoms in the 1970s. So not only that, his parents were also missing also.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of trouble, and a lot of problems in his life.
Parker has had to go through a lot of tragedy.
Yeah.
Gwen Stacy
dies. Gwen Stacy's father dies also.
Her father dies, Captain Stacy.
She breaks her neck. Mary Jane is the girlfriend who ends up being the main girlfriend, but Gwen Stacy was the main girlfriend at first.
And
there was a Betty Brant also.
You think about the first Spider-Man movies, not the shit from the 70s where
Tobey Maguire?
Yeah, like the Tobey Maguire ones. Not the shit from the 70s where you pull the shit off and then he had a big white fro.
Yeah,
and he's like, how do you fit that hair under there? But, so, they didn't spend a lot of time in high school.
Right.
So they the movies with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, focus more on a young adult, Peter. So now we have Tom Holland, who,
seems to be a very good cast at his age.
Still under Sony, but he represents the high school Peter Parker, which he's doing well.
Yeah.
He's doing well with the crowd. Now, I like it. I definitely like it. I still like, and no offense to Andrew Garfield, but I still like the Tobey Maguire ones. Maybe because it's my era Spider-Man, but I also do like Tom Holland. But I think it was a smart move on Marvel/Sony to come through with the younger Spider-Man, because Spider-Man initially he was the teenager.
Sure.
And everybody the young kids can identify with that.
Yeah, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. It's almost like he's in the late period of his teenage years. Even though they're telling us that he's still a young kid, but Toby was already a semi-older boy at the time, right?
And I think Toby gets away with it because he's a boyish man.
Yeah.
he's a man, but he's got a boyish quality.
He He really, well, you know what he's got? He really has. I've noticed he's got a great sounding voice, and he enunciates the words in the script real well.
Like he's theater trained, probably is.
Really theater, yeah, it's probably what it is. But he can really connect with him. So he at this time he'd already been through the trials and tribulations of you could say of the death of Uncle Ben to become Spider-Man. But his version was like a semi-older teenager.
Yeah.
In some ways, Peter Parker would have been interesting if Tobey followed Tom Holland, right?
Yeah.
But it never happened that way.
They really fleshed out the Uncle Ben as far as we got to see on screen, the Uncle Ben death.
Yeah.
They I don't want to say they dragged it out, but they really fleshed it out. I think one of the reasons that Spider-Man, like, he's endured and he's become, like, one of Marvel's, if not their top property, is the fact that he's a fun-loving guy at heart. I don't like when the writers portray him as always down on his luck. They got the shit the Parker luck or the Parker bad luck. I don't like that shit. Like, I like when he's having fun, he's cracking jokes, he's to lighten the mood. Like, when Spider-Man's cracking jokes, that means shit is really serious.
Oh yeah, because that's when he performs at his best.
Yeah, and he's trying to bring the levity. So I definitely do like that about the character. I will say Spider-Man is not one of my favorite characters now as a man, but I do believe that at heart, Spider-Man is really focused for the kids.
There's a lot of trials in there. There's a lot of trials of life being broken down in there for people. So I think Spider-Man does a very, very good job of actually covering what a teenager is all about. I mean, it's still a fictional variation of it, but I like it a real lot. Now, of course, Peter Parker's got the bad luck, but I think what that's all about, what that problem that you brought up is the writers who do the comics and the movies, after a while, they're kind of stuck on where the character can go. They've only got like a finite amount of room. You can't, if you go too far. We've seen some of the ways they screwed the character up over the years.
Yes.
Then he was rich. He owned a factory. He was acting like Peter Parker was acting like Tony Stark.
Yeah.
What was that? That was the Hopeless stuff. Not the Hopeless stuff.
That was Dan Slott's run.
Dan Slott.
Yeah.
Which I like his first run.
Yeah.
But keep Peter Parker the way he should be. Fun, happy.
Two things about that's definitely lasted as far as core components of both characters are the secret identity. They play heavy into both characters. Like you got characters like Steve Rogers, Captain America.
Doesn't care.
Everybody knows
Tony Stark doesn't care.
Tony Stark doesn't care.
I mean, there's all about Hawkeye. A lot of people don't care.
Yeah, a lot of guys don't care. Batman and Spider-Man, who are very much concerned with the people in their lives, and they have to keep the secret identity. And I think that, to me, that always played well. The hijinks of having to, cover up and the things you have to do to,
Sure.
to maintain, the secret identity. So to me, that's always fun.
It's a lot of fun. And one thing, too, is very noticeable is that the DC film characters and the comic book characters, they rely on, they love the over-the-top thing with capes and cowls and secret identities.
DC is capes. Yeah.
And Marvel's definitely more of a down-to-earth, on-the-street level type based superhero. Like, everybody can relate to the character more, which we already know that's the reason why their films are better, because they're much more relatable. If you want the pure superhero and all that kind of thing, the mythology of the superhero, DC's going to give it to you. But not everybody likes it. And you can see in the popularity of the comics and the films. DC is number 2.
Speaking of the mythology, I think the fact that these two characters have to go through so many trials and tribulation is part, because it speaks to the myth of the characters, and it goes back to mythology, Greek gods and Odysseus, and just Hercules and the 7 trials. You get all of these experiences, and Joseph Campbell, he wrote the Power of Myth, which is a big book for anybody that writes any form of literature. The Hero with 1,000 Faces is another one he wrote. But speaking to the myth, if you can really ingrain the mythology of a character, you can really nail it. And I think they definitely nailed it with both characters.
Yeah, I think they really do, and I think also between what both companies do together, I think they really they give the fans what they want. Exactly, I think they cover perfectly. If they both did the same thing the other guy does, we'd have a sterile world of comics.
Absolutely.
So I think I like the fact that they both go that way. DC has not tried to capitulate towards what they do, and Marvel's not doing the other thing. And I think it keeps it lively, and it keeps things like our conversations about comics live.
Yeah. So, do you see these two characters falling, in the rankings anytime soon?
No, not at all. I mean, those guys will always be doing well.
So, I guess that's why these two characters are so popular.
Exactly. Bingo.
Thanks for weighing in.
Yeah.
Thanks for weighing in with us.
Thank you. It's my favorite job too, man. My job entails a whole bunch of different things, and one of the things that it brings up all the time is, and I love it, is Doctor Who, man.
Fucking Doctor Who. I've never gotten to Doctor Who.
You haven't watched like a couple seasons when Matt Smith and some of those guys were there?
I've never watched an episode of Doctor Who.
But you know who he is. Obviously, you know the image and the suit and how he looks and everything, costume,
Kinda.
how she looks, right?
What's the blue building?
That's the
Taurus?
Tesseract. I called it a Tesseract. That's the time traveler. That's their. Holy shit! I forgot what the hell's called.
TARDIS? Is it TARDIS? Yeah.
Look, never go out to a diner before we record a show because they sell good beer and drinks.
Yeah.